Move that the House suspend the rules and pass House Resolution 559.
The clerk will report the title of the resolution.
House Resolution 559, resolution declaring it is the policy of the United States that a nuclear Islamic Republic of Iran is not acceptable.
Pursuant to the rule, the gentleman from Texas, Mr. McCall, and the gentleman from Illinois, Mr. Schneider, each will control 20 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that all members have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material on this measure.
Without objection.
Thank you. I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
The gentleman is recognized.
Speaker, Iran is a destabilizing force in the region that poses a threat to our allies and to our national security interests. That is why I introduced this resolution with a bipartisan group of co-sponsors to make a clear, simple, and vital statement that it is the official policy of the United States that a nuclear Iran is unacceptable, and that we will use all means necessary to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. This resolution is short and to the point. There's no hedging or equivocation. If we project weakness, it will only embolden Iran. In recent years, Iran has pushed its nuclear provocations to the brink, enriching uranium to 60% and openly violating both the JCPOA and its non-proliferation treaty obligations, and even kicking out 1/3 of inspectors from the IAEA. Iran is the world's leading state sponsor of terrorism. The Iranian regime has funded Hamas and other Palestinian terrorist groups to the tune of $100 million per year. 500 Hamas fighters reportedly trained in Iran in September before the October 7th invasion and terrorist attack. And what is Hamas doing right now? Waging a barbaric war against our friend and ally Israel. And now Iran's proxies are engaged in nearly daily attacks on our soldiers, on U.S. troops in the Middle East who remain in the region to ensure the enduring defeat of ISIS. Put simply, we need to restore deterrence against Iran. We need to use every tool at our disposal to keep Iran from having a nuclear weapon. It is critical that this body votes together to send a clear and loud message that Iran cannot obtain a nuclear weapon under any circumstances. And I thank my friend Brad Schneider from Illinois for joining me in introducing this resolution. I urge my colleagues to join me in voting for this resolution today, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This House of Representatives has a long history of working to halt Iran's nuclear program. We all know why the terrorist regime in Tehran must never, ever obtain a nuclear weapon. Look at what Iran is doing now. They are complicit in Hamas's terrorism against Israel. Through proxies, the regime is targeting American forces in the region with deadly force. They have built the region's most powerful terrorist organization, Hezbollah, which destabilizes Lebanon and threatens Israel with hundreds of thousands of sophisticated missiles. Iran props up the criminal Assad regime in Syria and the Houthis in Yemen. They interfere with global shipping, evade sanctions, and attempt to murder Israelis and others around the world. And these are only a few of the examples of Iran's nefarious behavior. Imagine what they could do, imagine what they would do if they operated under the safety umbrella of a nuclear weapon. Democrats and Republicans alike have said for many years, Iran can never be allowed to obtain a nuclear weapon. Since the 2018 ill-conceived withdrawal from the JCPOA, Iran's nuclear program has surged to extraordinarily dangerous levels, and the options to stop Iran from processing weapons-grade 90% highly enriched uranium are increasingly limited. In August, the IAEA reported that Iran's stockpile of 60% enriched uranium has grown since its May report. Iran now possesses almost 15 times the amount of enriched uranium allowed under the JCPOA. Furthermore, in September, Iran informed the IAEA of its decision to remove about 1/3 of IAEA inspectors from the country. I argue that we cannot take diplomacy off the table. We must keep all options open, but this is a very dangerous moment in dealing with Iran's nuclear program. In May, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said the following, quote, "We are also engaging Iran diplomatically regarding its nuclear program, and we continue to believe that it was a tragic mistake to leave the deal with nothing at all to replace it. But we have made clear to Iran that it can never be permitted to obtain a nuclear weapon. As President Biden has repeatedly reaffirmed, he will take the actions that are necessary to stand by this statement, including by recognizing Israel's freedom of action," end quote. The resolution before us today complements the Biden administration's policy of leaving all options on the table, and I am pleased to co-lead it with my friend, Chairman McCall. I will repeat, the regime in Iran can never have a nuclear weapon. With that, I yield and reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Illinois reserves. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Self, a member of the Foreign Affairs Committee.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I rise today in support of Mr. McCall's resolution to declare the policy of the United States that a nuclear Iran is not acceptable. I commanded a Green Beret Special Forces detachment that deployed a tactical nuclear weapon, and I stood strategic nuclear watch for 1 year. I was intimately familiar with the Single Integrated Operations Plan, the Strategic Nuclear Plan. I knew in detail the tens of thousands that nuclear war entails, deaths. The United States and our allies, including Israel, must prevent Iran from attaining a nuclear weapon by any means necessary. I urge my colleagues to support this resolution, and I yield back.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you. I yield 2 minutes to the gentlewoman from North Carolina, Representative Kathy Manning, the vice-ranking member of the House Foreign Affairs Committee.
The gentlewoman is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and thank you to my friend, Representative Schneider, for yielding me time. I rise in support of this bipartisan resolution I helped introduce with the House Foreign Affairs Committee Chairman Mike McCall and Representative Schneider and others to make clear that the United States will never tolerate Iran acquiring a nuclear weapon. Iran is the principal source of instability in the region. It is a major threat to our interests and remains the world's leading sponsor of terrorism, supporting terrorist groups like Hamas in their brutal quest to destroy our ally Israel. On October 7th, we witnessed the gruesome result of Iran's support for Hamas. This is the kind of terror that Iran facilitates. An armed Iran with a nuclear weapon would represent an even greater, entirely unacceptable threat to Israel and the world. For the past few years, Iran has flagrantly violated the terms of the nuclear deal, blown past restrictions, continued to enrich uranium to dangerous levels, bringing it closer than ever to being able to produce nuclear weapons. That is why this resolution emphasizes that it is U.S. policy to prevent a nuclear-armed Iran, as President Biden himself has made clear, and to support our partners and allies like Israel in the face of such an existential threat. Sending a clear message that Iran cannot acquire a nuclear weapon is about deterring Iran, not seeking confrontation or war with them. Colleagues on both sides of the aisle should agree that it is absolutely in our interest to restrain Iran's nuclear ambitions, and it is in the interest of a more stable, secure, and peaceful region. Mr. Speaker, I urge all my colleagues to vote in support of the resolution, and I yield back the balance of my time.
I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Illinois reserves, and the gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I have no further speakers and reserve the right to close.
The gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I yield 2 minutes to the gentleman from Texas, Representative Joaquin Castro, an esteemed member of our Foreign Affairs Committee and ranking member on the Western Hemisphere Subcommittee.
The gentleman from Texas is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, unfortunately, I have to rise in opposition to House Resolution 559. I'm proud to represent San Antonio, Texas, known as Military City, USA, which is home to one of the largest concentrations of military bases in the United States. Every year, tens of thousands of young men and women pass through my city on their way to military theaters around the world. Their lives are sacred, and Congress needs to be careful about how our decisions can put them in harm's way. While this is a non-binding resolution, it would speak for the House of Representatives without meaningfully engaging with the broad range of tools at our disposal to prevent Iranian proliferation. I strongly oppose Iran's pursuit of a nuclear weapon. That's why I supported President Obama's efforts to constrain Iran's nuclear program through the JCPOA, and why I opposed Donald Trump's decision to release Iran from the restrictions on its nuclear program by violating and then withdrawing from the JCPOA. But this resolution, in saying the United States must use, quote, all means necessary to prevent Iran from pursuing a nuclear weapon, goes too far. Do we support sending U.S. forces, ground troops into Iran to stop their nuclear program? What about using a nuclear weapon ourselves? That's what the language of this resolution would support or allow. This isn't just leaving all our options on the table. This resolution endorses every option. In recent years, Congress has had important bipartisan conversations about reclaiming our constitutional authority over the use of military force. If the Congress is going to endorse the use of force, even in a non-binding resolution, we need a more deliberate debate before going forward. This resolution also commits the United States to endorse the actions of any of our partners and allies to prevent Iran from obtaining a nuclear weapon. Would we support Saudi Arabia or the UAE if they were to unilaterally strike Iran, putting the hundreds of U.S. forces stationed in the Persian Gulf at risk? This resolution commits to unconditionally supporting their, quote, freedom of action. While I strongly oppose Iran's nuclear program, the language we are voting on today goes too far. I urge my colleagues to vote no, and I yield back.
I reserve my time.
The gentleman from Illinois reserves his time.
I continue to reserve my right to close.
Gentleman from Texas reserves. The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
We're ready to close.
The gentleman from Illinois is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, I yield myself as much time as I may consume.
Gentleman is recognized.
Mr. Speaker, HRES 559 is an important restatement of the administration policy. The Iranian regime can never, ever be allowed to acquire a nuclear weapon. I urge my colleagues to support this measure, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back. The gentleman from Texas is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We've seen repeatedly through history that weakness invites aggression. We certainly saw that in World War II with Hitler's aggression. Our adversaries, Russia, China, Iran, and North Korea, are increasingly working together to upend the global balance of power. They are enabling each other's aggression against the United States and our allies. This body has a responsibility to project strength and protect the American people. And we will speak with one voice as we deliver a clear message that Iran's nuclear escalation must stop, that a nuclear Iran is simply unacceptable, and that the United States will never permit a nuclear Iran to exist. So I urge my colleagues to join me in voting for this important resolution, important voice on the United States of America through its representatives. And with that, I yield the balance of my time.